Okay, well, welcome everybody. We are getting towards the end of the season. And many of you know my name is Lynn Vartan, and I'm the director of A.P.E.X. events. And I'm super excited for today because this is the first of what we hope will be an annual occurrence. And that is what we're calling our Art and Design Roundtable Discussion. Every year there is a senior art exhibition in our great Southern Utah Museum of Art, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And all of our seniors get to get their art on display and really explore what it means to bring an exhibition together. So at A.P.E.X. events, we want to talk about what that process is like, what the artistic process is like in general, what creativity is like for these artists, where they're from, where they're going, and all of this kind of thing. So that's kind of what today is about. We're going to do it sort of like an interview. I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions, and they're going to talk a little bit about themselves and about the art that they're making and about the show that's going on right now. So what I'd like to do is start with some introductions. We'll start down at the end of the table, and if you could just tell us your name, and you're all seniors or out of school. I think we have one out of school, but mostly all seniors. And tell us just a little bit maybe where you're from and what your area of specialty is.
I'm Sherilyn Shumway. I'm from Logan, Utah, and I am an illustration major. I'm planning on, well, I don't have a definite plan yet, but I'm interested in editorial illustration and art licensing.
Oh, great. Okay, we'll talk more about that. I'm curious.
So art licensing is kind of it wasn't a field that I knew about until recently, but basically illustrators will create their own series of images and then go to conferences and license those images to companies to then put on products. So this ranges from like greeting cards to designs on t-shirts to children's clothing. And then editorial illustration is, of course, for newspapers, articles, things like that. It's more conceptual, and so conceptual work is something I really enjoy.
Oh, great, cool. Next.
I'm Melissa Kruger, and I am representing the graphic design area. There's other graphic designers, but I think mine's like more general. So anywhere from like web design, publication, branding, yeah, that kind of stuff. And I don't have anything specific that I want to go in. When I graduate, it's kind of just either at an agency or an in-house.
Great.
place.
And are you from here or are you from somewhere?
I am from California, actually. But,
whereabouts?
It's called Brawley. It's right next to Mexicali, Mexico. So I'm just way south.
Way south.
Yeah, it's about 2 hours east of San Diego, so
cool.
in the middle of the desert.
Awesome. What brought you to SUU?
I actually took a campus tour and just really liked it, and obviously tuition weighed into it. And I have family from St. George, so I just always came to Utah, but I've been here this is my 7th year now.
Wow.
So go SUU.
Awesome. Well, congrats. You're getting out. Great. Next.
Okay, I'm Mackenzie Cragen. I'm from Roy, Utah. It's up by Logan. And I am also a graphic design major. I guess I'm representing more of the interactive app design, though, because that's what my project was that's on display in SUMA. And I have a little bit of experience with that. So I might go into that when I'm done with school, or, yeah, maybe just other graphic design stuff.
So in the
I don't really know yet.
In the show, you have an app that you've designed that's in the
Yes.
show. Tell us a little bit about it.
So it's a travel app designed for people just who find themselves in a new area for a short amount of time and they want to get out and explore some different sites and things. So it just kind of helps you create an itinerary of places that you're interested in and shows you like different ways of transportation and things like that to help you get there. So.
Oh, cool. How
Yeah.
long does it, I'm totally new to app development. How
Me
long
too.
does something like that take how long did it take you to take an app from idea to design?
So I kind of came up with this idea like November, December-ish, and I pretty much knew what I wanted to do with it, how I wanted to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So I mostly just worked on the design aspect of it, starting kind of in January up until the show started. And then I just kind of prototyped it so it kind of functions. I didn't actually develop it or code it, so it's not real, but
Right.
yeah, that's all just the design part.
That's cool. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
All right, next.
I'm Jordan Haskell. I'm from Orem, Utah, and I'm also a graphic design major. I specialize in motion design, which is where I want to take what I've learned here and someday hopefully work for films, short films, commercials, any type of motion and video production.
And tell me a little bit about your piece that's in the show, too.
Okay. My piece is, it's an actual movie that's going to be pitched someday.
Oh, great.
It's for a friend of mine who lives in LA, and they have a small crew, and they shot the footage, which I collaborated with them on, and I designed the title sequence for this film that will eventually be pitched someday to an actual movie production.
And can you tell us what the topic is or what it's about? Or is that, yeah.
So the title is Banking on Crazy, and
Banking on Crazy?
Banking on Crazy, yes.
I like it already.
And the plot, the shortened plot is, it's a group of friends who want to make their own movie, and they try to crowd fund it. They try to go the indie route, which is where they're an independent production, and it doesn't go their way. And so they get the idea to pretend to shoot an actual film in a bank, and they rob it at the same time instead, to produce their own movie. Yeah.
That sounds cool. Oh, we'll look forward to that. Great. And next.
I am Michelle Gray, and I am from Cedar City. I am the token photographer here at SUU. I've shot basically everything.
Yeah.
But the ultimate goal and dream would be someday shooting for like National Geographic. I really like wildlife and landscape, what I call adventure photography.
Yeah.
So like putting someone in a really like diverse and dynamic like landscape, that's where my heart is most happiest.
Yeah. How cool. Well, you're definitely in a great place to start that process. You know, I have that on my mind because our event on Tuesday, that some of you may have been here. Wow, we saw some great images of big wave photography and all of that kind of stuff. So adventure photography is on my mind right now. So that's exciting. What about your piece that's in the show, or your work that's in the show? Do you have work in the show also? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have 2 photo books and 4 photographic pieces in the show, and they highlight this idea of adventure photography or being like a small person in a big place. And then my photo books are like my travel photography. So I've been to Africa shooting wildlife on a camera, and so they're like collages of that and really cool just places that I've been or projects that I've worked on.
Great.
That's everything.
That's great. So Africa and wildlife photography, that must have been a really powerful experience.
It was, and it's kind of a stepping stone. I guess why I got into photography was because I wanted to do underwater photography, and I'm in a very bad place for that. Great for adventure, bad for underwater.
Right.
I've always been in love with marine life, so sharks and sea turtles, and I would love to like step into marine wildlife photography. And it's a whole new world, but I'm really excited to start.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Sounds great. Cool. Well, Lissy, how about you?
So I'm Lissy Edwards. I am from Sandy, Utah, just a few hours up the road. Been here for 3 years. I am the ceramic sculpture major graduating this semester. Fell into it from many diverse different backgrounds. Originally a 2D artist who fell in love with the tactileness of clay and learning to incorporate illustration with clay and bring those 2 worlds together has been a fun exploration.
Oh, interesting. Tell me a little more about that. How do you actually work with those 2? Do you go off of an illustration and then try to recreate it, or how does that all work?
So all my illustrations are original. They're from my illustration background. I have a degree in illustration. So I am passionate about the ocean and ocean conservation. So
We've got this ocean theme going.
That's why we're sitting together,
We're close.
yeah.
So I made these feet, I sculpted feet, and I made molds and so I could make replicas. And then I illustrated different ocean impacts, the way humans are impacting the ocean and may not be realizing, especially being in such a landlocked area where ocean conservation is not big on everyone's minds, but it's always been something I've been really interested in. So I illustrate different sea life or different situations sea life can be found in that humans have impacted.
Yeah.
And use different ceramic techniques I've learned to put those illustrations on it. So I use china paints or glazes and
Wow.
kind of turn illustration into a ceramic medium.
Oh, that's great. And your piece that's in the show, or pieces that are in the show?
So I have some of my feet impact in there, and I have some abstract pieces. I love doing abstract and figurative, and those are ocean inspired, so they're kind of abstract corals that
Great.
are open for interpretation, but they remind me of the ocean and of coral.
Awesome. Well, cool. And just to go back a little bit to Melissa and Sherilyn about your pieces that are in the show. So either Sherilyn, how about what piece do you have, or pieces do you have in the show right now?
I have an art licensing range that I created. It's a series of patterns that I call my pothead patterns. There's 6 different patterns. 3 of them have potted plants, and each of them is, it's kind of hard to explain. I've never explained it to anyone before. Each of them is like a different mood. So I have a bunch of angry ones that have spiky plants. I have a bunch of really sad ones, and there's correlating patterns. And then I created a wall art piece that you would see with a typical range, and then I got those patterns printed on pillows to show how they could be applied in the real world.
Oh, cool.
That's one of them.
That sounds great. Well, it's great to hear you guys describe your own works, and we'll talk about the show itself, but everything that you're hearing about right now, you can see live and in person right now at the Southern Utah Museum of Art, but we'll get into that in a minute. Melissa, how about your piece?
Yeah, mine, I chose to kind of make up a company called Eves, and it's a bath product company, and so I branded that and kind of decided what I wanted for the company. And I wanted it to be a very natural, organic company that has hand soaps, bath bombs, and shampoo and conditioner. And I really wanted to keep the integrity of the project, so I ended up actually making my own soaps and everything except the shampoo and conditioner. But then I branded that and packaged it, so I did package design. And that all stemmed from this floral design that I ended up doing a lithography print of. I really like doing the hands-on projects, so I really like letterpress and printmaking and things like that. And so once I had that print done, I decided to use that floral pattern throughout the whole package design. And then I screen printed that pattern on tissue paper to keep with the handmade theme. But yeah, I think I just really like that project because you can smell it and has a different element to it.
Well, that's a really cool thing to hear. Several of you, I think for many, there are many artists in the room, but there are also people who are new to art in the room, and I think some people have an idea that art is this very visual thing, but to hear so many of you talk about the tactile, the kinesthetic, the touch, the smell, this kind of thing, that's kind of an interesting little bit to bring in there. So thanks for telling me about your work. Let's talk about the show now. This is the Senior Bachelor of Fine Arts Capstone Exhibition. And it's a showcase of all of the art studio experience for graduating students. For each of you for everybody who has pieces in the show, also included, I believe, is an artist statement of how you do your art and your concept behind it. And one of the things that's great about the exhibition is that the students really get to conceive, plan, and execute a body of work appropriate for a professional exhibition. The exhibit has, in addition to what you've heard here, art education represented, ceramic sculpture, as we've talked about, illustration, painting, drawing, printmaking, photography, and much more. So here are the specs about where to go and find this. So the exhibition is at the Southern Utah Museum of Art, which most of you, I'm sure, are aware, are just on the corner over there. It just started. It started March 20th and is running until May 5th. So you have a lot of time to see it. And if you're interested in a gallery talk, that's going to be on Thursday, April 12th at noon. So all of the work that you've heard about today and much more is there. So definitely go check it out at the Southern Utah Museum of Art. Okay, let's get a little deeper into the artistic process. I am curious if any of you would like to tell me about how you started making art or why you started making art. I know we've got this marine thing over here, we've got some web app stuff, we've got the film thing. Do any of you have kind of an experience or a story that is kind of your launching point that you'd like to share? Yeah.
So my dad did photography and like is more of the artist out of my mom and my dad. So I was just always around that and really loved photography, like Michelle. And so when I came into school, I actually have a degree in math.
Oh.
So that's why I've been here for 7 years. It did not take me 7 years to get an art degree.
Oh, cool.
But when I came in doing that, I started minoring in photography. And then I was kind of like, well, I don't know like what I'm going to do with that and why do that. And so that changed to a graphic design minor because I just started taking the classes and really enjoyed it. And then when I graduated, I actually found that I was applying to more graphic design catered jobs rather than math. And I was like, well, it's only 2 more years to get a full degree, so why not? And so I just kind of followed more of my passion. And yeah, that's
And
my
that's great
art
because I mean, I
background.
think for so many people, for so many of the students in the room, you know, you come in maybe with one direction and they say, there's some statistic about undergraduate students changing their major a couple of times, but I mean, there's so many different paths. So it's really interesting to hear how the math art merging. And do you find, do you go back to that sort of mathematical side of things in your art?
Not as much. There definitely is some like math element to design, especially when using grid systems. And there's a lot of stuff that you make by hand, and so you have to measure and cut and be really precise about certain things. But it's completely different. Like they both have their problem solving in completely different ways. And yeah, I like the element of the problem solving in design.
Cool. How about anybody else? Any other origin stories to share?
I'll share one, I guess.
Okay, great.
I had the opposite of Melissa, I guess, where she changed her major. When I came to college, I was a declared graphic design major because when I was in high school, as a senior, I took kind of like a graphic design class. I don't even know what it was called, but we did like some very basic graphic design things in there, and I like had always liked art and drawing and art classes and things growing up, so I took a lot of those. But in that class in high school, we had an opportunity to do, there was like a design and ad contest that was like a statewide thing or whatever, and I just kind of made something and was like, oh, this is kind of cool, and I won it. Actually, I got like first place out of the whole state, and I got like
Congrats.
$50 or something, which I was like, wow, that's a big deal. It was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just realized that I liked doing that, and I just decided to come and try it in college, and I've just loved it ever since. So
Awesome. Great. Did anybody else have one to share? That's fine. If not, I'll go on. Jordan, you're looking like you maybe have one.
I could, I guess.
Okay, if you want. I mean, if not, okay. Just I thought you maybe were looking like you wanted to share one.
Sure, why not? I remember I've always been interested in art growing up, but around high school, I was really trying to find what I wanted to do. And I remember I had a friend who had broken her longboard, and she didn't know what to do with it. So I decided that I would take it and fix it for her. And it ended up being this really cool piece that to this day I still regret giving it back to her. I wish I would have kept it.
The one that got away.
The one that got away, yeah. But I actually realized in that time that being presented with a problem and a solution and helping other people, I think that's what really inspired me to go into graphic design. At that time, I had been more interested in like animation, like 3D animation. So I was really conflicted till I actually came to SUU and we started talking about motion graphics, and I really discovered that I could merge those two worlds together, and I really found like that's what I wanted to do. That was my passion.
That's cool. Interesting thread. I've heard problem solving now a couple of
Yeah.
times, and I think that's I love that as a teacher. I mean, so many people know I teach music, and the problem-solving aspect of art is really interesting, and that presents these challenges that you want to kind of wrap your brain around. And so that's cool that thread is kind of coming out in the conversation. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about inspiration, and I'd love for you to share, any of you, with the audience, what inspires you, or what kind of inspires. I know we maybe have the outdoors in some cases, or maybe there's some specific artist or specific thing that you're into, but and I know inspiration comes from multiple places, but just so our audience gets an idea of things that are inspiring you to make the work that you're making. Does anybody have any of that they'd like to share? Maybe we could get some of the outdoor stuff going on here.
Well, inspiration's hard because it really is like sometimes you'll just be sitting there and it literally hits you, and then other times you really need to seek it out. I have a photography Instagram that I specifically follow only photographers on.
Oh.
So I can see what people in the business are making, and especially like stuff that I really like. So I follow multiple like conservation foundations,
Yeah.
or like there's a turtle like page that they post the turtles they save and then they re-release, and they talk about the issues, and so you can see what art people is actually making. So that's definitely inspiring, and this might be a bold claim, but I think you should also make work that inspires you.
Yeah.
So like I tell a lot of people a lot of the work that I make, I put a person in, and I like to think after I look at it that I wish I was that person, even though I was there. Like I had to have been there to take that picture.
Yeah.
But I would like to be that person in the wild, like, you know, gallivanting through whatever we're doing, and
Yeah.
just being bold and adventurous. So
That's cool, and I love that idea of, so you have an Instagram account that's separate than like your personal account that's just dedicated for that, like a lookbook or an inspiration book. Ooh, I'm gonna steal that idea
Yeah,
and tell my
it's
students
yours.
to do that for music. That's a great thing, because in my own like Instagram, I have it all mixed together. So I've got everything from food to like percussion to, you know, all kinds of crazy authors and things like that. But that's a great, so when you really just kind of want to get inspired, you can go to that separate place where you're only going to be, you know, really shown that. That's a great idea. Super cool. Thank you.
all yours.
Thank you. That's awesome. How about anybody else? Inspiration. What inspires you? Who, what, where, why? What kind of inspiration do we have going on?
I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is from the ocean, but a little bit maybe more strange is a lot of it is color. I love color, hence the really bright shirt.
Yeah.
But I love color theory and figuring out how colors work and how they move together. And so when I make my abstract sculptures, I focus a lot on the form and then what colors will work with that form and what colors on top of those colors or what I can add to bring those colors together. And even when I do my illustrations, it's all very color focused. What colors make what part stand out? What color evokes this emotion in this part? And how people aren't realizing color informs their world.
Yeah.
We use color a lot more specifically than people realize, and that's something I like to investigate, especially when it comes to ocean pieces, because if it's like a nice solid blue ocean, it's calm. If it's gray or rough, it's a very angry ocean, so it brings that back in, and color is a very interesting thing that a lot of people aren't aware of that I like to bring to the front of their minds.
Do you feel that that's something that's been with you since you were a little? Like, I mean, is that, were you are always interested in color, or is that something that's kind of more evolved as you've gotten more into your art?
I think I've always liked color, but being an artist and learning about color theory and how to make colors and different colors and how there's warm colors and there's cool colors and there's colors that evoke those emotions, I've paid more attention to it. Like you can look at a cloud and it's not gray, it's got blues and purples and pinks, and I take a lot of joy in picking out those subtleties and finding where those exist. So definitely more since I've been aware of it, but I think color is a fun thing to
Cool.
make other people aware of too.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for that. Any other inspiration sharing that you'd like? No? Okay, cool. We'll move on to the next thing, which is I'm always curious about where people make their art, you know, like their studios and the tools that are important to them. And like, you know, when in my main studio, the setup, you know, I have some very specific things in there that mean a lot to me and really help me kind of get going, even on those days where maybe I don't want to practice or I don't want to rehearse or something like that. So I'm curious if any of you have a most important artist tool to yourself. Is there something in your studio or in wherever you're making art, is there something there that you just can't live without, that really is kind of important to your process. Does anybody have anything like that?
I have a camera. That's important.
Right, so the photographer's camera
Yeah.
is super important. So are you the type of person that has your camera with you all the time?
No, actually, because you have to compartmentalize your time. So I can't really bring it to work with me, and I don't like letting it sit in a cold car.
Right.
However, I do after I've done like a shoot, so I do like a lot of weddings, senior portraits, families. If I need to like force myself to be motivated to edit them, I have a mug that I fill with tea, and it says editing day, go away on it.
Oh.
And so I sit down at my desk with that mug, and everybody knows like to leave me alone because I'm now in my space.
I
Like,
love
This
it.
is my editing space.
That's great. That's cool. I love those things. I love those little, like, all of our idiosyncrasies. I mean, authors have them. I'm sure everybody in every area, you know, those things at your desk or whatever your particular desk is in your line of work that you can't live without. Anybody else have any tools that are particularly important to them? Jordan, are you nodding your head? Sherilyn, did you have something?
Pens for me.
Pens.
Because I don't remember when, in school, 6th grade, something around that time, I stopped using pencil entirely to write all my assignments because I hated how it smudged, I hated how it looked. So I switched over to pens. My teachers hated me for it because for some reason it's wrong to write in pen. I don't know why. And then because I was always writing in pen, I didn't have any pencils, I started doodling with pens, and that's what I draw with. I hardly ever draw with pencil. And I have particular pens I really love, certain inky ones, stuff like that. And then also something kind of random, it's not a certain tool, but I need to sit on the floor usually. Because I can never find like a table. I just need to like spread out. So I usually sit on the floor. I keep like my bed to push to the side of the room on purpose because of that. I have pieces of wood that I keep to lay down on the floor that are like my desk on the floor. That's how I work.
That's so cool. So do you have a pack of pens with you all the time, or are those like you have a big stash in your studio?
I have buckets of pens in my room. I have certain pens that I always carry with me.
That's cool. Awesome. Okay, well, another thing I'd like to know about the process is about the moment when art is finished. So the moment when a piece is finished. And I was curious, how do you know when a work is finished? Or do you know when a work is finished? Anybody?
I'll go.
Yeah.
I think this is a question that artists always ask themselves is like, when is it finished? And I personally don't think a piece is ever finished. I think it's the point, like, when are you able to walk away from it? Or when are you able to finally put it in the museum or turn it in or whatever? But I know I'm representing the graphic designers, but I also do photography. And with photography, I find myself going back and re-editing pictures because my style has changed or my editing style. And with graphic design, there's just always something that I'll find, like some spacing that's off or the kerning or the leading, or someone will make a comment in the final critiques that's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And I think being critiqued or having other people look at your work changes it, and that's why it's never finished, is just because you can always go back and find something you didn't see before, or your style changes. So, yeah, I think it's just finding the time. Is that me?
I don't know who that is. It's me? My hair? Probably me.
But it's just the point when you kind of feel like, okay, this is the best that it's going to get right now. And sometimes you need to step away from it and go back to it at a later time. But, yeah, I just don't think anything's ever finished.
Is that frustrating to you, or is it something you kind of come to learn to live with, or how do you, I mean, and I know you're speaking personally, of course, but I'm just curious. I don't know if this is me or not, but we'll find out in a minute.
I don't think it's frustrating. Sometimes I just tell myself, like, okay, I need to just step away from this for a while. And then I come back and I'm like, I think I'm happy where this is at. Right. But yeah, I don't think it's ever been a frustrating time to say like, oh, I just wish I could finish this, because it feels finished at the time.
Great. How about anybody else? Is it sort of similar for everybody or different?
Ceramics is weird because we have different stages we have to reach to get to a finished piece. You've got,
Right. Tell us about that.
So clay is very finicky, and it likes to dry. And sometimes you don't want it to dry, so you keep it in a wet state, and then you let it get to a little bit of a drier state, and you can do things there. But eventually, you have to stick it in the kiln.
Right.
And get it to a point where it's turned into bisqueware, and then you can't go back and really change a lot on it. There's a few maybe like touch up on the surface you can do, but it's essentially finished at that stage.
Yeah.
And then we have to glaze it, and glazing's a whole other different side of it where the piece can go a different direction, or it can get ruined because the kiln does whatever it wants sometimes, and there's a lot of control you lose at the end.
That's so interesting about, because you have that a little bit of that mystery of like, what's it going to turn out
and
like?
You put it in the kiln, you're like, okay, it should come out white, and it comes out blue, and you're like, that is not what I put in the kiln.
Surprise!
Yeah, it's like a mysterious Christmas that we get every time we open the kiln. And so I like to think our ideas aren't finished, but we have to finish a piece.
Right.
And if it's not what we wanted, then we try to troubleshoot it, figure out where we went wrong or what we'd like to improve. Sometimes you can work with the glaze and maybe glaze it a few more times and try to work with it, but essentially it's to a point where you can't do much more with it.
You have to finish and then relinquish control.
Yeah.
And how does that feel?
It's bad and good.
Right.
We learn to accept failure a lot quicker, because if it doesn't work, you're like, okay, that piece obviously was not a good direction, but I can still try again, and I can do it again. And so we learn to finish pieces, but keep the ideas and work on ideas that aren't finished and just keep moving forward. So we make a lot more work that is finished, but I guess in your mind, the idea is not finished. Because you move the unfinished part to a different part of the work. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, it's interesting.
That's cool. It's great to learn about all these different things. Well, I have another sort of process question. When you start a new project, do you kind of pre-plan it, or do you kind of just follow inspiration? Or is it a combination? I mean, what's the process like? Do you sort of go, oh, I have this idea, this is the project I want to do, and then you see it? Because sometimes with composers, for example, they like hear the music in their head and they just have to get it out on paper. Do you see a completed work in your mind, or a work that's, or how does that work with from inspiration to process completion for any of you? Just kind of your process in that way.
I can take this one.
Please.
It depends on the project, because let's say I did an illustration for an article recently, and when you're doing something that is going to go alongside something that's going to be published, you want that piece to represent that article and to draw readers' attention so that they click on the article. It needs to represent the story or whatever theme that they're trying to get, that the author's trying to get across. So I did an illustration, and the article was about how cats pick up their behavior from their owners. Oh. And so to start out that project, instead of like envisioning a final piece, I make like a list of, okay, I need to have these certain elements in it. I need a human in there. I need a cat in there. I need to show how they're connected somehow. And then style-wise, I would go for something a little more simple, because with articles and stuff, it needs to be a quick turnover. You can't do like an oil painting. Right. So I did a digital piece, so that will determine a lot of the style and what the original or what the final piece looks like. Whereas something like a painting that I would do for myself, it's often prompted by either an image that I see that has something that interests me, or if I'm like reading a book or something and there's certain wordplay that gives me an image in my head, that's when then I have a piece or a certain thing that I'm trying to go towards. And so it really varies on the type of project that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Anybody else have any feedback on that topic?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
With this project that we did for the BFA show, I actually had a personal goal that I wasn't going to, at any point, just completely start over. I was going to follow through with my initial concept.
Oh.
So we storyboard a lot in motion design. So my initial concepts, I feel like I did a better job of coming up with a concept and being able to stick through it. Mm-hmm. But I also left myself open to be able to experiment, and I found a lot of like little happy accidents that went along the way. Mm-hmm. But if I hadn't had that structure, that plan in the beginning, I feel like it could end up like a lot of my projects where you can just be frustrated with it and just start all over again.
Yeah, that's something that, I mean, I think comes up a lot. Do any of the rest of you have that tendency to you get frustrated with something and you're like, that's it, I'm done with this and I'm going to start over? Does that happen a lot for some of you or not too much? Happens a lot?
Squish it,
Yeah.
rewedge it.
Squish it down? That's awesome. Cool. Well, now, so for some of the dreamy stuff for a minute, if you could interview a creative person, past or present, who would that person be and why?
I would want to interview Picasso.
Ah,
He worked in a lot of different mediums. He did some sculpture and he did some ceramic, which a lot of people don't realize.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and not saying it was good ceramic. I haven't seen a lot of it either. But he wasn't afraid to experiment, and he wasn't afraid to be true to his art and what he wanted to do. And I watched this really cool video of him working on a painting, and he would just wipe out parts and repaint it and wipe it out again, repaint it. And he wasn't afraid to let his idea change as he worked on it. He wasn't afraid to use whatever was at his disposal to get his idea. And I really admire that and want to know how he reached that level of bravery in his work and how he'd work through that process of being willing to destroy it while he's working on it and when he decided it was finished.
Yeah, fascinating. Picasso, yeah, I'd love to hear from him too. Who else? Anybody else have somebody?
I mean, I have a huge list. So
Yeah, tell us about a few.
There's Ansel Adams. He invented landscape photography. It'd be so cool to sit down and talk with him.
Right. And great adventurer.
Yeah. And there's also Margaret Burke White. She was one of the first really big, commercial female photographers. And there's this very, very famous photo of her on a giant building taking a picture down, before we really had, drones to get, aerials. So she's literally on the edge of this there's a statue on the edge of the building,
Yeah.
and she's sitting out over the guardrail on top of this statue with her old film box camera, and it's the most inspiring thing I've ever seen because there's this hardcore lady taking this photo, and I think she would have stories.
That's amazing. What was her name again?
Margaret Burke White.
Margaret Burke White. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
she shot, I believe, for Life and Time magazine during the 50s and 60s.
Wow.
Hopefully Sam's not here judging me on my photo history knowledge.
Cool. Great. That's great. Those
Yeah.
sound exciting.
Yeah.
How about some of the others? Any other people that you'd like to interview? Jordan's got one.
So there's so many, I don't know.
Yeah? Too many to
Too
count.
many to count.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have one that they'd like to share? No? Okay. Well, how about artistic movements? I mean, we see a lot of great artistic movements. Of course, we can go back, way back in history. I mean, even Renaissance, medieval, and beforehand. But if you had a chance to live in another time or during another artistic movement other than now, which one would you choose? And tell me a little bit about why. Anybody have an answer to that? Yeah.
I think the Art Nouveau movement was, I don't know, I just really like the time when they made posters by hand and hand carved a lot of stuff, and I'm just really big on the hand making things, and I think that was a time where people could be really creative. I think now in design it's really hard to have an original idea because a lot has been done already. All the styles are already out, and it's just really hard to be new and inventive with design. And so I would like to go back to the time where you could do anything and it was new.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that kind of handmade? Because some people I know about that, but about the handmade posters, like you were talking about, how did they do it? How did that, or a little bit, or just
Dr. Marvick is here, so I don't really want to embarrass myself.
Okay, but so posters on wood and that kind of thing. Is that
Yeah,
sort of
I think anything from lithography to linoleum cuts, even just hand painting signs, just all of it. Letterpress especially was huge, and just hand setting all of the type.
Yeah.
And Jeff's here also judging me on my letterpress knowledge.
No,
And,
you guys, your professors are excited that you're here. Are you kidding? This is cool.
But yeah, it could be anything, any of those processes. Lithography obviously was way older than those types of processes, but that's stuff that I really enjoy learning about, and the history and how the processes that they used to use.
What about the rest of you? Anybody like dying to go back to the medieval era or the Baroque era or any of those? I mean, is there a time, 50s and 60s when, maybe women in art photography? What are some other times that are really interesting to you that you've maybe studied or know about? Anyone?
Lisa said cave painting earlier. I thought that was really funny. And
Yeah, right? I know. Come on. I thought
Just
you were
back
going
when art was new and, there was no judgments or critiques or biases, and you could just paint on a wall and you wouldn't get in trouble for it.
Yeah.
So.
Cave painting. But that's really cool, right? We don't think about what was that, what were those time periods, like? What were, was that just an expression, or was it a more, part of their cultural day by day? But that's interesting. So yeah, you'd like to go back there. I love it. Yeah. Cool. Anybody else? You might have one. No? Okay. So something that people tend to love to know about artists is like the things behind the curtain, the things below the surface. So I'm curious if any of you put any hidden meanings, or if you have any hidden things in your work. Do you tuck things away that only you know? And if you want to just say yes, or if you want to share some of them that are shareable, then that would be great too. But do any of you put hidden meanings in your work, or is it more kind of what you see is what you get?
I just made a piece. It's in the BFA show. It's not really something hidden, but it's an optical illusion.
Cool.
That I purposely didn't point out, and it's something I want people to be able to discover, where if you stand in a certain spot in front of the piece, there's lines that line up and bring the piece and make it flat.
Oh.
Instead of being three-dimensional, so it kind of flattens a 3D object, which
Okay.
is a fun illusion. And that's something I'm just barely starting to explore with the different forms, but...
And that's one of the pieces that's in the show. Can you tell us the name of that piece so we can take a look?
It's a long title.
Is it? Yeah.
Corals and salmon, moss and azure.
Okay,
So, it's one of
great.
the
So everybody
abstract
can go
pieces.
check out that one and sort of take a look and sort of see. How about in the others of you? Any other hidden stuff? Any other secret languages or illusions or symbolism in your work?
Well, if you flip over all of my images and rub the back with heat and lemon juice, there is a map.
No.
Just kidding.
All right. But that's cool, though. But I think it's interesting because I know sometimes you hear about that, and I was curious if any of you in your process have done that. So
I think going along with that, though, there's always well, not always, but generally there's deeper meanings when artists create something. There's something affecting them that day even. So this is kind of angrier because this person said this to them, and so you're frantically making this artwork. And I think that kind of comes out whether we really want it to or not.
yeah.
Or there is I'm setting out to do this, to create this because I feel this, and it needs to be there. It needs to. I have to see it for myself instead of feel it. So there's conceptual stuff too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that kind of goes with one of the other questions I wanted to ask, and that's if you could be an agent for change through your work. So if you could change one aspect of society through your work, what would that be?
I would like to change our use of plastics.
Ah.
We have gotten to the point where we use plastic. It's very disposable. It wasn't meant to be disposable. It lasts for hundreds of years, and it doesn't break down. It just breaks apart. And we don't realize that it's everywhere we look. It's in the streets. It's here, and I'm just making people aware. I'm not saying you shouldn't use plastic, because plastic has its purposes, but also finding different ways to reduce it and to realize that even though you don't live by the ocean, plastic still ends up there from everywhere. It travels amazingly. There's this funny mockumentary on YouTube about the life of the plastic bag and how it starts by escaping in the parking lot, and it makes this grand adventure to the ocean where it creates havoc. So just making more people aware through my art that this is something we should be more focused on and working to change as a culture.
This is particularly timely this week because actually Susan Casey on Tuesday was talking about this exact topic, and when I was driving her around, we saw a couple of plastic bags just stuck in a tree, and she was talking about how the water column is being affected by it, and she said that and it's a really interesting point that plastic has its place, but plastic doesn't degrade, doesn't biodegrade. It's made from petroleum and all these things like you were saying. So she was really recommending definitely, avoid using straws, things like this, the plastic bags, all that kind of stuff. So that's great that you're taking, she's taking the journalistic approach to it. Now we've got you taking the artistic approach to it. That's fantastic. How about the rest of you? Are there any other things that you'd like your art to sort of be an agent for change? Yeah.
I'd say inclusion.
Ah, great.
I'm very proud of my heritage, my Mexican-American heritage, but I also feel in a lot of different industries there's still unequal pay. There is all of these work cultures that can be changed. And in the graphic design community, we have a saying of design for good. And I think that's one thing I really love about graphic design is that they really focus on trying to bring people up, not just using it for whatever need that they have, manipulating the market. Like there's an awareness there in the graphic design community.
Great. I love that. Inclusion. That's certainly a great topic to sort of focus on. Anyone else? Anything else that you're like trying to say or would like to say with your art?
I guess mine's not really like with my art, but just in the, I'll just speak for the graphic design community. But I think that it's really easy to compare yourself to others. And so I really just try to be an advocate for just like knowing your self-worth and knowing how good you are as a standalone and not, especially with social media and in our classes and stuff, it's really, really easy to compare yourself to other people and other artists and say, I'm not up to so-and-so standards or whatever it is. And so I really like to advocate like on my social media or in my everyday life that like you are who you are and like you just need to create art that you think is good enough for yourself and not for other people.
Right.
And so, yeah, but I don't think I necessarily represent that in my art specifically.
Right. But that's an important aspect of being an artist or being in the arts in general. And how do the rest of you deal with that? The idea of comparison with others, is that something that you struggle with? Is that something that you have to just ignore? How is that for some of the others of you?
I think comparing yourself to others in every aspect of life will destroy you in the end. Like you look at like physical fitness, and if all you're doing to get healthier is like saying, oh man, I wish I was there, I wish I was that person, you're never gonna be able to start on that path. Mm-hmm. And I think you gotta find something within yourself in your art that's not for others, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're not like, oh, I wish I could make art like them, or I wish I could take pictures like them. It's like, this is for me. Like, I'm going out on this hike not only because I need photos, but because I want this. Like, and that means that your art is fulfilling you, and then maybe someday fulfilling someone else. Who knows?
Right.
Like, you can sell it, or you can like use it for whatever you need. But that's something that I've realized going through art classes a lot.
How about when you get stuck? Do anybody have? How do you? I mean, if you get stuck creatively, what do you do to get unstuck? Maybe take a hike, or do you have any tactics for getting unstuck in your creative process?
I think the best thing I have found, because I get stuck a lot, it's really easy to get, it happens a lot, getting in a creative rut. But the thing that works best for me is just working through it. Like just forcing myself to sketch out or just start a project, even if I know I don't like that idea. Just doing it will bring up new ideas, and then that's how I work through it. It's just forcing myself to keep going.
Yeah. Keeping your hands busy, just making work. Maybe it's not the best work or it's not where you want it to be, but you don't get any better. You don't get past those ideas if you don't make those ideas. If you don't keep working in your craft, if you stop, it's easy to keep at that block. And sometimes you get tired of what you're doing, so you switch to a different medium. You find a way to liven up your process, find something new, a different technique you can start using that will help you push past that block. But I agree, just hard work, keeping going, and just when you don't want to, I think sometimes that's when you need to do it the most.
I love that you guys said that because that's so true. I mean, that's definitely true in my teaching and certainly in music. I mean, as much as we all love what we do, there are just days where, you just got to get in and do the work, and that's going to get you over the hump, and that's going to get you through a difficult spot. So that's fantastic. How about another of the difficult side of things, and that is critique. Do you critique your own work, and how is the critique process? We mentioned earlier the benefit of others looking at your work and critiquing. Can you talk a little bit about your own personal critique and how you handle that, and perhaps how critique works with others and how you feel about that part of things?
I'll say something
Yeah.
now. I love critiques a lot. I think that plays a big part in when you get stuck a little bit. If you just aren't sure what to do or something, if you get another pair of eyes on it, or just ask other people what they think, you can get a lot of feedback and new insights on things that is really helpful, and you think, man, I've never thought about that before, or that's a really good suggestion that can help you get unstuck, I think. So.
Yeah.
And I think adding on to that, for me, it's really important to get opinions from people who I really value their opinion, because it means a lot more coming from someone that you look up to or you like their work or something like that. I think it's important to get their opinion on your own work.
Anybody else? How do you feel about critique? No comments? How about, have any of you had a difficult time, like in the beginning, perhaps in the beginning of your careers, where critique was a really uncomfortable, like, I don't know, I don't like this. Did any of you have to kind of go through that of sort of getting comfortable with critique? Was that anybody's experience?
I think it's hard. Sorry, I'm talking a
Yeah,
lot.
no, I love it. Are you kidding?
But I think it's hard to take critique sometimes, especially when you really love something that you've done, and then hearing people say oh, I don't really like this aspect of it or whatever. For an example, with my show, there in the Eves logo, I really liked this really cool S, and no one liked it. And Jeff said that sometimes you have to drop your favorite piece. Even with movies, sometimes they drop their favorite scene because it's not working for the whole piece. And I dropped it, and I like the logo now. But sometimes it's really hard to get over that, but I just really love this, and I'm really attached to it, and I can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
But then once you do, it works better as a whole.
Great. Well, last question, and this, is just today. I'd love to know what your dream job or dream position or today, and of course that changes and evolves. It's probably not the same as it was a year ago, and it probably won't be the same in a year, but just curious to know, and we could just kind of go down the table, what's your dream job or dream position?
That's a really hard question. If I could be a successful freelance artist, that would be great. If I could own my own business selling my products and being able to hand make them and screen print and make a living off of that, that would make me very happy.
Cool.
This is so hard, but actually a dream job of mine, as well as Michelle's, is to work for National Geographic and shoot for National Geographic. That's been a dream of mine since I was 10. But in the graphic design world, I don't know. I really have always wanted to work in the entertainment industry, whether it's with musicians or movies or anything like that. But it seems very out of my reach right now. So just working up the ladder, really, and being a creative director. Cool.
Great.
I think for me, it just simply would be working somewhere that allows me to work on a variety of different projects. I like in school how we take all these different classes, and I worked on web projects and branding projects and packaging projects and just all of that, and I love all of that kind of. So to go into one specific thing, I'm not sure how I'm feeling about that yet, or what that one specific thing would be.
Yeah,
so
cool.
I don't know. I like the change and the variety. So
Yeah,
that
great.
would be ideal for me.
Awesome. Jordan.
I'd love to work for an agency or in-house, but for a film title
Great.
Agency. I'm one of those guys who will stay after the credits to the very, very end just to appreciate the amount of work and amount of talent there is in going into making a film. So I'd love to see my name up there
Perfect.
at least once.
Well, we'll be looking for it. Yeah, that's awesome. Great.
I think if I could get a job snuggling puppies for a living, that would be a dream.
I see.
However,
I see.
not terribly realistic. But yeah, it's branched off a little bit. So I think initially coming in, I really wanted to do, like, I wanted to scuba dive for a living and take pictures of it. And that's developed into, like, there needs to be a purpose. There needs to be a reason why. Like, I can't just scuba dive and not have a reason to. And so that's where I kind of, like really fell in love with, like, I guess, that doesn't make any sense. Let me backtrack. So, like, the issues with the ocean, like, and highlighting those because we don't realize what's going on because we don't live in it 24/7. Not just pollution, but there's overfishing, there's shark finning, and then there's, like coral bleaching. Like, there's so many issues, and part of me is like, oh, like, you don't need to see another person, like, preaching conservation at you. But if I can make a change, like, if I can somehow figure out a way to reverse coral bleaching, like, that would be amazing. If I can raise an awareness of that through photos, that would be amazing. I don't know
Right.
what that is, but that's the route we're taking right now.
Well, like I said, with all of you, we'll be on the lookout for it. That's cool. Activism, photography, get things moving. I love it. Lissy.
I'm with Michelle. I want to work more with ocean conservation. So my goal after here is move somewhere warm where there is an ocean, where I can actually get involved in that and make art that shows my involvement with it and gets people involved, that inspires them to be involved as well. So kind of a passive message, but being involved and knowing that I'm making a difference and giving other people the opportunity to learn so they can also make a difference.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Well, I'd like to thank you guys all so much for coming today, and I'd like to remind everybody about the show and a little bit of housekeeping at the end of the semester. So first of all, the BFA Capstone Exhibition is at SUMA at our Southern Utah Museum of Art right now, and it's running all through until May 5th. So definitely go and check it out and look for these pieces that we've talked about today. Enrollment is open, so if anybody is interested in taking the A.P.E.X class, the convocations class, there is a one-unit class where you just basically go to the events, and some of you in the class are in the room, and there's also an honors section of that. So if any of you are that's going to be brand new, the honors section. So enrollment is open. We'd love to see you in that. And then we're at the end of our season, so our last event is on Tuesday. We'll be back in the Great Hall, and that is the keynote for the Festival of Excellence. And the reception is going to be huge. There's 6 tables of food that are going to be out there for everybody to eat. So tell your friends to come to the keynote and then come to the reception afterwards. So again, just to close up, a huge round of thank you so much to our artists, and I look forward to your future. Yay.